You've probably made a decision before, and deep down, you already knew it wasn't a great one. But did you stop? No, you kept going. And then came the interesting part. You explained it, you justified it, you built a very convincing story about why it actually made sense, and somehow you believed it. We all do this. And honestly, we're extremely good at it. Hello and welcome back to Bookworm. Today we're diving into The Social Animal, a book that reveals something slightly uncomfortable. We are not as rational as we think we are. We like to believe we think carefully, that we analyze situations, that we make smart, logical decisions. But in reality, we often decide first and then build a story afterward to make that decision feel right. Not because we're stupid, but because our brain hates being wrong. It really does. It would rather twist logic, ignore evidence, and protect the decision than admit a mistake. That's why people double down on bad choices, why they ignore obvious signs, why they stay committed long after things stop making sense. And the worst part? It feels completely logical while it's happening. Stay with me as we dive deeper. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hey, welcome. We all like to think of ourselves as pretty logical, right? That we make our decisions based on facts and good old common sense. But what if I told you that a lot of the time we're actually being driven by these hidden psychological forces that we don't even see? Well, today we are diving deep into Elliot Aronson's classic book, The Social Animal, to figure out why we so often do things that on the surface make absolutely no sense. And this right here is the big question we're going to try and unpack. We've all seen it happen. Maybe it's a friend who stays in a really bad relationship or a politician who just keeps doubling down on a policy that clearly isn't working. Heck, we've probably all done it ourselves. You buy something you know you can't afford. It seems, well, crazy. But what Aronson argues is that it's not crazy at all. It's perfectly and predictably human. All right, let's start with a really wild example from the book. So a guy gets hypnotized. He's told that when he wakes up, he's going to go grab a raincoat. And sure enough, later on, it's a beautiful, sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, and he walks over and puts on a raincoat. Now, when someone asks him why he's wearing it, he doesn't say, you know what, I have no idea. Nope. He invents a reason on the spot. He says something like, well, the weather looks a little changeable. He's creating a narrative, a story, to make his totally illogical behavior seem perfectly logical. And that is the essence of self-justification. And that story perfectly illustrates what Aronson calls his first law. The man in the raincoat isn't crazy. Not at all. He's just a normal guy in a really weird situation, and he's driven by this powerful, unconscious need to make his actions feel consistent and rational. So the big takeaway here is, if you want to understand truly bizarre behavior, don't just look at the person's personality. You have to look at the social pressures of the situation they're in. Okay, so let's get right into it and start taking apart this huge myth we have about ourselves. The truth is, we aren't the cool, calculating thinkers we imagine we are. In fact, a lot of the time, our brains are just working overtime to make us feel like we are. And this brings us to one of the most important ideas in all of social psychology. And that big idea is called cognitive dissonance. The psychologist Leon Festinger came up with this, and it's basically this deep mental discomfort we feel whenever we hold two conflicting thoughts in our head at the same time. You can think of it like psychological static. It's this tense, unpleasant feeling, and our brains are incredibly motivated to make it go away. Here's a really simple way to picture it. Let's say cognition A is your core belief. I'm a good, honest person. Okay, now imagine cognition B is something you just did. I just cheated on a really important test. See how those two things just don't line up? They clash. That deeply uncomfortable feeling you get in that moment, that is cognitive dissonance. And the drive we have to resolve that tension, it's unbelievably powerful. The philosopher Albert Camus said that we're basically creatures who spend our entire lives trying to convince ourselves that our existence isn't absurd. Well, dissonance makes us feel absurd. So our mind just kicks into overdrive, desperately searching for a way to make those two conflicting ideas fit together and restore that feeling of consistency. So how in the world do we resolve that mental tension? Well, that's what we're getting into next. It turns out we become storytellers. We start crafting these incredible narratives that justify what we did, not for other people, but mainly for ourselves. This is the whole machine of self-justification kicking into gear. And this right here is the absolute key. When you're facing that dissonance from cheating on the test, you've really got two options. Option one, change your behavior. You could confess, take the F, and promise to never cheat again. That is really, really hard. Or you can do something much, much easier. You can change your belief. You start telling yourself things like, oh, the test was totally unfair, or come on, everybody else was doing it. Or maybe even, hey, in this dog-eat-dog world, you gotta do what you gotta do to succeed. You rationalize the action by changing your attitude about it. There's this classic experiment that just shows how far our minds will go to do this. Leon Festinger and Merrill Carl Smith designed this brilliant study to actually see this process in a lab. And it perfectly captures how we can come to believe our own lies, a phenomenon they called the saying is believing paradigm. Okay, so the setup was simple, but it was genius. They had people come in and spend a whole hour doing these incredibly tedious, mind-numbing tasks, like turning wooden pegs on a board a quarter turn over and over and over again. After the hour was up, the experimenter would say, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you go tell the next person waiting outside that the task was actually super interesting and a lot of fun? Now, for telling this little lie, some people got paid $20, which was a lot of money back then, while other people were paid just one single dollar. And here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. When they were later asked to privately rate how much they genuinely enjoyed the task, the people who got paid $20 said, yeah, it was boring. But the people who were paid only $1, they rated the task as being significantly more enjoyable. So what's going on here? Well, think about it. The $20 group had a great reason to lie. They were paid well. We call that sufficient external justification. But what about that $1 group? A single buck just wasn't enough external justification to make them feel okay about lying. So their brains are screaming. On one hand, I'm an honest person, but on the other, I just lied for practically no reason. To reduce that dissonance, they had to create internal justification. They actually changed their own belief about the task. They convinced themselves that, you know what, turning those pegs, it wasn't so bad after all. It was kind of zen. They made the lie true inside their own heads. So up to this point, we've been looking at all the mental gymnastics we do inside our own heads. But our behavior is also powerfully shaped by a huge external force, the people around us. So now let's explore the incredible pressure we all feel to conform, to just follow the pack. Solomon Asch conducted one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. He brought groups of students into a room and showed them a card with a single line on it, and then another card with 3 lines. The task was painfully simple. Just say which of the 3 lines on the second card was the same length as the first one. The correct answer was always obvious. But of course, there was a twist. In every group, only one person was a real participant. Everyone else was an actor, and they were all told to give the same, obviously wrong answer on most of the tries. So just imagine you're that person. One by one, everyone before you confidently calls out the wrong line. Now it's your turn. The evidence from your own 2 eyes is telling you one thing, but the entire group is saying something else. What do you do? The results were just stunning. 75% of participants went along with the group's incorrect answer at least once. Overall, people conformed with the clearly wrong majority about 1/3 of the time. And this wasn't because the task was tricky. When they did it by themselves, they got it right almost 100% of the time. This was just the raw, pure power of group pressure. So why do we conform so easily? Well, Aronson points to 2 big reasons. The first is what we call normative influence. It's just a deep, deep desire to be liked and to fit in. We don't want to be the weirdo, the one who rocks the boat and risks being rejected. The second reason is informative influence. Especially when a situation is a little fuzzy or we're unsure, we look to the group as a source of information. We just assume they must know something we don't. And this really gets at a fundamental human struggle, doesn't it? Do you trust your own gut and risk being ostracized, or do you go along with the group to be accepted? Aronson points out that when students are asked about things they regret doing, they often talk about bullying or teasing someone, not because they were malicious, but simply because they wanted the approval of their friends. That need to belong can be so strong that it literally overrules our own moral compass. Okay, so we're rationalizing machines that just bend to group pressure. Sounds kind of bleak, right? But the goal here isn't to feel bad about how our brains work. It's to understand the system so that maybe we can navigate it a little bit better. So let's talk about how to become a wiser social animal. The very first step is just to accept this basic truth. Our brain's main job isn't always to find the objective capital T truth. A huge amount of its energy is actually dedicated to making us feel consistent, moral, and smart. We are masters of rationalization, not rationality. And you know what? This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. For thousands and thousands of years, our survival depended on being able to live in small, tight-knit groups. The ability to keep the group harmonious, which is conformity, and to feel good about our place in that tribe, which is self-justification, that was a massive evolutionary advantage. The only problem is that these ancient mental tools can sometimes really backfire in our complex modern world. So here's the most important point of all. You can't just turn these tendencies off. They are wired into us. But by understanding them, by knowing that cognitive dissonance and the pressure to conform are always humming away under the surface, you gain a huge advantage. You can start to catch yourself in the act. You can learn to pause and ask, wait a minute, am I believing this because it's actually true? Or am I believing it because it makes me feel better about something I just did? And that brings us to one last personal question I want to leave you with. Just think about a choice you made recently. Could be an impulse buy, a decision at work, anything at all. What's the story you told yourself about why you did it? And more importantly, was that story created before, during, or maybe, just maybe, after the decision was already made? Because understanding the social animal always starts with understanding ourselves. Thanks so much for joining me.
If there's one idea to take from this book is this: we don't just make decisions, we defend them relentlessly. Once we choose something, our brain quietly shifts into protection mode. It starts filtering information, adjusting logic, and building a version of reality where we were right all along. It's subtle, but incredibly powerful, and honestly, a little dangerous, because over time this turns into confidence, even when we're completely wrong. That's how people stay stuck in patterns, in beliefs, in decisions that no longer serve them. Not because they can't change, but because admitting they were wrong feels worse than staying wrong. A bit ironic, right? But here's the good news: the moment you recognize this pattern, you gain control. You can pause, you can step back, and instead of asking, am I right? You ask something much better. Am I just protecting my ego? That one question changes everything. If this made you think differently, like the video, subscribe to Bookworm and stay curious, because understanding how you think changes how you live.